Welcome to A Real Point of View, everybody. My name is Greg Morgan. I'm the Real Movie Guy, and this is A Real Point of View. And joining me today are my associates in film critique crime, and we've got Karen D., the movie maven, and we've got Stephen C., the man who doesn't pick a bad film. So with that being said, we decided to kind of take this a little bit further. We started with the year 1967 in homage to 50 years of film from 1967 to 2017. So we started in the decade 1997, and we decided to extend this to the next decade, 1977, and we'll probably do this all the way until we get to 2017 and review some movies in 2017, because by then there'll be a bigger body of work out there to view and review with regard to film. So why don't you go ahead and give us kind of an overview about 1977, Karen, and let our listeners know what to kind of expect.
Well, in terms of American history, we were still sort of reeling from the impact of the Watergate scandal. It's a scandal that caused the president to resign, and the person who took over, Gerald Ford, left office in 1977. Jimmy Carter was elected president in 1977. He was a one-term president. Mondale was the vice president, and Tip O'Neill began a long reign as Speaker of the House, one of the longest reigning speakers of the House in American history. Apple Computer was incorporated in 1977. Snow fell in Miami for the first time ever in its history, I think, and it hasn't happened since then, but that happened in 1977. The TV series Roots, which changed the landscape for African Americans and also for the format of the miniseries on television, was shown in 1977. James Earl Ray, the man who assassinated Martin Luther King, escaped but was recaptured. Elvis Presley did his last concert in June of 1977 and died less than 2 months later in August of 1977.
Wow.
The U.S. Department of Energy was created in 1977, and 39 years later, one of the people running for president called for its abolition. So there you go. That was Rick Perry, who was running for president, called for the abolition of the U.S. Department of Energy, and he is now secretary of that department. So there's irony for you.
Right.
The Son of Sam was captured in 1977. The Panama Canal, the treaty to hand over control of the Panama Canal from the United States to Panama, was negotiated in 1977 with the handoff to be happened by the year 2000. Reggie Jackson hit 3 homers for the Yankees, and that helped them win the World Series in 1977. Harvey Milk was the first openly gay supervisor, and he was elected in the city of San Francisco. Sadly, he was assassinated a few years after that. Let me just mention some famous people who were born in 1977. Orlando Bloom, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Zachary Quinto, Maggie Gyllenhaal. So they're all turning 40 this year. People who died, who were associated with the movies in 1977, Freddie Prinze, Joan Crawford, Groucho Marx, Ethel Waters, Bing Crosby, and Charlie Chaplin.
Oh, wow. Wow, that was a lot. That was cool. So just like anything else, we look back in time and we can actually find things that are related to things that we know and understand today, i.e. the birth of all those actors and actresses that we watch today. Some historical elements that have had a impact on our lives from there to now. Those are interesting things. I think that was very cool. So we're having some technical difficulties with one of our critics, with Steve. Hey, Steve, can you hear us? Okay, well, hopefully he'll bounce back in momentarily. He's having some issues on that end of our broadcast here because each of us is in basically a different city. So why don't we go ahead and proceed without Steve until he returns?
Okay.
There he is, on cue. Okay, Steve, can you hear
It's
us?
like you waved your magic wand and there he was.
Well, you know, sometimes you get.
I exist.
He lives.
Well, Karen's already gone.
Say again.
Karen's already given us kind of an overview on 1977 and some cool fun facts that have occurred over that time frame.
My brother was born in 1977.
Hey, see, that's cool.
Yeah, my brother, he was born January 18th, 1977.
Very cool. Well, he's had some prestigious people that along that line that were born during that time too. So they're very cool.
Yep.
Well, Steve, 1977, was that a good year for a film for you? And did you find some films that you wanted to present today?
I'm assuming you asked if that was a good year.
I did.
Yes.
I did. I have my own opinion.
It was a very good year. Two movies I can think of right off the top of my head. Star Wars. It was the birth of Star Wars. And yeah, we all know how that turned out. You know, not pretty.
Yeah,
not
that
bad
didn't
at
turn
all.
out too well.
Yeah. George Lucas really becoming a huge icon. Harrison Ford taking the great leap into acting gold. Carrie Fisher as becoming the idol of many young teenage boys
And girls.
and girls, and Mark Hamill just being an all-around a surprising actor when you think about it. A lot of people don't think of Mark Hamill and how really well-rounded and long a career he's had, but from Star Wars on, he's done amazing work in everything he's touched.
Yep.
Oh, very
And
cool.
Especially
and it
voiceover
also
work.
gave us, oh yeah, great voiceover work. It also gave us the second highest grossing movie of 1977, which put Pontiac Trans Ams on the map. And we got to see the beautiful, rugged, mustached face of Burt Reynolds in Smokey and the Bandit.
That's true. Very
So,
true.
an amazing comedic movie. Burt Reynolds does an amazing job. It's introduction into movies before. Yeah, had never played a really predominant role. Amazing comedy. Amazing different style of comedy. Going cross country was a big thing at the time, especially because there were laws and things that you couldn't do in one state that you could do in another state.
Right.
The main premise of Smokey and the Bandit is Big Enos and Little Enos are trying to get Coors, a favorite beverage of theirs, to Athens. I believe it was Athens, Georgia, in, was it 48 hours? I believe it was 48 hours. And nobody said they could do it, and nobody really wanted to do it. But it was actually illegal to have Coors south of, hang on, I got it right here. Oh, east of the Mississippi River at the time. And
Wow. That's crazy.
that was
That
the
is
premise of the movie.
crazy.
Was they found Burt Reynolds, who was a Beau Bandit Darville at the time, and they find him, and he enlists his buddy, which is Jerry Reed, which plays Cletus Snowman Snow, and his dog. I cannot remember the dog's name for the life of me. I apologize. I cannot remember the dog's name for the life of me.
After
But
all
they-
the dog shows we talked about recently,
I know. And we didn't, yeah. This one never came up in that show.
because it probably wasn't harmed.
They're right. But they Burt Reynolds actually becomes the blocker. He's not actually driving the truck. He's in the Trans Am and is meant to distract police from the truck, the semi driving down the road. So that's his whole goal and purpose. And then they end up picking up Carrie, a runaway bride, played by Sally Fields, on the way down. And Burt Reynolds actually nicknames her Frog because she's kind of cute, like a frog.
Oh, geez.
What woman does not want to hear that?
That's not at all demeaning.
And they're being chased by the famous Jackie Gleason as Buford T. Justice and his son Junior.
Oh.
And it's an all around just awesome movie. Great speed chases. The ridiculous amount of wrecks that you would normally see.
Crazy. I was wondering what Sally Field was doing in this movie, frankly. When Smokey and the Bandit came out, it was like, what is she doing in this movie? She's a consummate actress. What is she doing in this movie with Burt Reynolds?
Well, sometimes Burt Reynolds would pull a lot of people that were friends of his into a lot of the movies with him. And this was probably one of those moments.
I think they were more than friends.
Well, there you go.
But actually,
underbelly of Hollywood.
But actually, it was
revealed.
It was a good career move for her. I couldn't see it at the time, but that was like really broad comedy, not something that she was at all known for. Right. And I mean, she was known for sort of light TV type comedy, but there was still like a real chasm between like the true artistry of the movies, and it's like if you couldn't make it in the movies, you landed in television. That was still very much what was going on at the time, and that line has pretty much been erased today. So you'll see actors, like consummate actors, doing television, movies, commercials, plays, community theater, whatever. But in those days, you were in the movies unless you really couldn't. You tried to get to the movies. That was your goal. If you couldn't get there, then you landed in television somehow, some way. So Sally Field had a very good reputation as a good actress, but not a great actress. She did until got movie role, or she got I think it was a made-for-television movie called Sybil, where she played a woman with multiple personalities and did like an amazing job. It just like blew everybody away that she was so freaking good. And then she went on to do movies, and I think did she win her Academy Award for the movie that she did with Paul Newman about, oh my goodness, it was the movie about journalism. What if what you wrote was accurate, but what if what you wrote was accurate, but none of it was true?
I can see the scenes of her in the newsroom.
I can't
think of the name of the movie.
I can see the scenes too.
If you could check that out for a moment. So
yes,
Steve,
I will.
Before you clocked out of there for a moment, you were talking about Smokey and the Bandit. Any other films that you thought in '77 were worth mentioning to our broadcast audience?
The only other one that I had, of course, Star Wars, but the only other one that I had was a documentary of sorts. It's the second time, I believe it's the second time in films we see Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it was a theatrical release.
Pumping Iron.
But Pumping Iron, which follows him and a famed Hulk star, Lou Ferrigno, in their quest to be professional bodybuilding and becoming Mr. Olympia, in which Schwarzenegger wins. And it kind of shows a true representation of what actually happens or used to happen during bodybuilding competitions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I ironically, back then, I actually saw Pumping Iron. It actually is a very good documentary. And a
Um,
lot of other bodybuilders are introduced that you may not have ever known otherwise in the mainstream back then. Because, you know, with bodybuilding, there are different classes, weight classes, just like boxing. And so, you know, the guys who are smaller in the weight classes where they were not as tall and not as girthy, a lot of those guys you miss out on those really good bodybuilders of especially of that era, like Frank Zane, um, who was not in that same weight class, we'll say, but yet a very good bodybuilder of the time.
Let me jump in for a second. The movie that I'm trying to think of is Absence of Malice.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
but
a really good movie.
she actually won the Academy Award before that. She was in Sybil. That was a TV miniseries, not a made-for-TV movie, but a miniseries in 1976. She was nominated for a Golden Globe for that, but that really put her on the radar as someone to be watched. Then she took on the role of Smokey and the Bandit, the role of Carrie in 77. She was nominated for a Golden Globe for that, for her work in that movie. And then she starred in Norma Rain 1979, for which she won the Academy Award, in which she famously said, "You like me, you really like me." So, in her acceptance speech.
I remember that.
You really dated yourself, but okay, if you remember
No,
that.
I remember it because you say it so much. Oh, baby. Mine is more residual.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, thanks, Steve, for those cool movies. Hopefully, again, we're having some technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. So hopefully, he'll be able to get back on the screen here with us momentarily. So, Karen, what movies did you have that you thought were, you know, worthy of our 1977 homage to that decade or to that year?
Well, I think 1977 was I agree with Steve, it was a very good year for movies. It's hard to believe that was 40 years ago. And I mean, there was some really, really interesting movies that came out during that time. Woody Allen was in his heyday then. And one of the movies that came out was, oh God, with Diane. Oh my God, I just drew a blank on Annie Hall, that movie, yes. And I mean, but then there were like some really good war movies, like MacArthur came out starring Gregory Peck. Really interesting science fiction movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and really just interesting sort of slice of life movies. Now, there were a lot of really good movies, I think, that were released in 1977, covering all kinds of different aspects of life. I want to talk about 3 movies during our podcast. So I'll just tell you which ones I want to talk about. Capricorn 1, which is just a kind of a guilty pleasure for me. Saturday Night Fever and The Turning Point are the 3 movies I want to talk about. So let me start with Capricorn 1 first. I love this movie. I love this movie when it came out in 1977. I love it today, even though it's completely and utterly dated. And it has O.J. Simpson as one of its co-stars, and the man's been completely vilified since then. But in spite of that, I just think this was a fabulous movie, really ahead of its time. For one, it sort of took on the conspiracy theorists because of a running we would call it a meme today. It was not called a meme then. But a meme, a running meme at that time was that the moon landing that had occurred in 1969 hadn't really happened. That was just like a huge scam, a conspiracy of massive proportions that was concocted by NASA and went all the way up to the president because it never really happened. So Capricorn 1 sort of takes that little meme and takes a step further. So we have a situation where NASA's in deep funding trouble. That hasn't happened at all, has it? Oh, yes, it has. Okay, so NASA's in deep funding trouble, and they are undertaking a manned mission to Mars, as it happens. And they've got 3 astronauts. Sam Waterston plays one of the astronauts. James Brolin plays one of the astronauts, and O.J. Simpson plays one of the astronauts. And so they're going off to Mars on this first of its kind space mission. But what happens is that somebody figures out that the rocket is not safe, that the rocket that they're not traveling on is not safe, and the mission gets scrapped like the night before they're supposed to take off. Mm-hmm. However, this causes massive, hysteria within NASA because the funding's in trouble, and the head of NASA says we cannot afford to have a scrub mission. We cannot afford to be in this position, so we've got to go through with the mission. Wow. So then somebody says, well, why don't we just pretend that we do the mission? We don't tell anybody. And then, and then we'll bring them back and, and everything will be hunky-dory and we can keep our funding or whatever. And so somebody says, yeah, that's a good idea, like the head of NASA, but we're not going to tell anybody, especially the astronauts. So the astronauts think that they're going off to some mission, but they end up being dropped off in the desert somewhere. Meanwhile, Elliot Gould plays this reporter who is snooping around and something just doesn't smell right to him. And he keeps digging and digging and digging. And Brenda Vaccaro, who plays the wife of, I think she plays James Brolin's wife, says somehow she and Elliot Gould hook up and because he's covering the space mission, and she's like, something just doesn't feel right here. There's something really wrong. And he keeps digging and digging only to find that the mission never happened. So anyway, I just love this movie just because of that. Just this wild, except it's not really all that wild idea of government conspiring to create a construct so that the money keeps coming.
Wow, that's crazy. And the sad thing about a film like that is, with that conspiracy theory, is it makes the people who are watching that film uneasy. Mm-hmm. And makes those people, tell their friends, and now the domino effect becomes a negative. And now NASA is getting hate letters and people are picketing saying this is not real, and right. And it causes mass hysteria.
Right. Which is kind of what happened in the movie. Yeah. But
and indirectly too, in real life, I'm sure.
And I think to me, the strongest thing about this movie was its storyline. I don't know if the acting really rose to a level of just that warranted effusive praise or anything, but they had some really good actors in this movie. James Brolin, I think, is probably one of the most underrated actors around. He's one of those guys who he takes on some difficult roles, and he's not one of these people who kind of turns into or morphs into physically the characters that he's playing. So I think it's easy to dismiss the work that it takes for him to do what he does as an actor, because you don't see this physical, almost physical transformations that some actors undergo or take on. People like Matthew McConaughey come to mind. Mm-hmm. So it's not like that so much, but he still infuses his characters when necessary with a lot of gravitas. He can play a general, he can play a crook, he can play, I saw him in Diagnosis, a rerun of Diagnosis Murder. Was it Diagnosis Murder? No, I guess it was Monk. I'm sorry, it was a rerun of Monk where he played a surgeon who actually murdered his wife, but he can also, play an astronaut or, these sort of everyman type characters with ease. And I think it takes some acting chops to do that. Sam Waterston is somebody else who, has been more highly rated than James Brolin over the years, I think. But I've always loved his acting. And Sam Waterston's one of these people whose only job has been actor. He's never had to have like some other job to make it until he could actually make it as an actor, because from a very early on, he was tagged as somebody with a great deal of talent. And he was, he had sort of like that everyman face, and he was just like immensely hireable immediately. He really lucked out in that regard. And, but then probably the weakest actor of them all was O.J. Simpson. And Ellie Gould Ellie Gould, also a fine actor. I'll never forget the work that he did in MASH. The movie MASH. He was brilliant in that. The weakest actor of all of them was O.J. Simpson. Fortunately, he wasn't given that much to do in this movie. They really traded on his name. The reason he was attached to this movie was to get butts in the seats. It wasn't because he was just this awesome actor. He wasn't. He never was.
Right. So you had two others we can.
Well, I was just going to tell you. I mean, we can trade off.
Okay.
We can hear from you or Steve.
Steve says crickets. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, no. I mean, there is one.
Go ahead.
I mean, there is another movie.
Go for it.
That I was thinking. It's from our favorite agent of all time for British intelligence. It's a movie called The Spy Who Loved Me. Roger Moore is not really at the top of.
Thank you, Steve. I was waiting for that.
In my opinion,
okay.
Robert Moore is not at the is not at the top of everybody's James Bond list, but it's hard to argue he was involved in some of the really good Bond movies. This one especially did a good job. There's not really much to tell about the movie. It's cheesy Roger Moore James Bond movies, but we get the very first introduction of Jaws.
What?
The villain.
Oh,
and that's a character that's always interested when it came to the James Bond films, because he was so interesting. Normal villains, because he even though he was a sub villain, he still had his major stamp on the Bond universe.
Right.
And give me 1 second.
I was going to say, I don't remember any fish in The Spy Who Loved Me.
Oh, really? You got jokes? That's how we're gonna do this. That's what's going on. Or you're gonna be that person. Okay, no, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine, Karen. That's fine, Karen. Rain on any parade I may have.
Oh, come on! I rain with love.
Oh yeah, Dad.
And when she said rain, she meant REI. not RAI.
But it's just it's a very James Bond movie with all the excessive gadgets, the missile car firing from the sea, the beautiful Bond lady. I don't know whether you could call any of the Bond ladies. Like, some of them are just not good people.
Yeah, some of them were pretty
with some pretty outlandish names, if I do say so.
Yes, and then there's that.
But we gotta keep this PG.
That's the influence for you. What's interesting to me is I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I think part of my problem is I'm coming across again as a purist. I'm such a Sean Connery Bond guy. And I remember Roger Moore, and I think what messed me up with Roger Moore, not so much because they have changed the Bond to Roger Moore. It was more, every time I'm looking at Roger Moore, I think of The Saint from the television show, which was so very similar to this Bond character. It might also be one of the reasons why they tapped him to be the next Bond or be one of the Bonds. But I kept looking at The Saint. I'm hearing his voice and I'm hearing The Saint. So it wasn't overly convincing for me. And I guess it's my malady not being able to make that transition. And Roger Moore was a little light as Bond, not as tough as Sean Connery was elegant and tough, and Roger Moore was just elegant. He wasn't believable as being tough in his latter years like that. I think maybe if it was a younger Roger Moore like he was in The Saint, it would have been a little bit more convincing, but I wasn't getting that.
To me, you know, the other thing that sort of just didn't work as far as I was concerned was that not only was Roger Moore just really connected with the television show The Saint was sort of like the also ran of the Avengers. So it's like the Avengers was like, that was like the iconic series. And The Saint came along and was like, oh yeah, you're still trading on the fact that we really love the Avengers. So now you're going to have The Saint. And then you've got James Bond, and everybody thinks of Sean Connery as the iconic James Bond. But then Roger Moore is like, comes along, and then you're like, oh, so now because you're just going to keep trading on James Bond and making money off of James Bond. So now you've got Roger Moore in there. So it's like the timing for him just wasn't good in terms of like really being able to capitalize.
Either way, because I agree with you. I think The Saint. I agree with you. I think The Saint was very much like the Avengers, and even though the Avengers was a duo, a team, it's still the things that they did and how they did them was so very similar. Or I should say, the Saint played off of those things so very directly that you almost seemed like it was an extension. Right. As opposed to a whole nother show. Exactly. And I think in American TV series, Beretta and Toma was the same situation, even though they were actually projecting the same persona, changing the name a little bit, but it was really the same persona based off of a real life individual. But one coming after the other, you're like, okay, if you saw Toma and then all of a sudden you see Beretta, you're like, this seems very familiar. Not being able to change it up a lot.
I love how we just rehashed an entire conversation from a previous video. It's the exact same conversation.
And even we did it just now. Thanks, Steve, for reminding us about that episode.
When did we do that? Was I even in that episode when that happened? Was that during when my day?
No. This was months ago.
Yeah, we did have a similar conversation.
Okay, but I wasn't in the conversation.
Yeah, I think you were.
Oh, really? We should just observe as in way of recognition that Roger Moore, who played the Saint and was in the Bond movies, recently passed away.
Yeah, that's very true.
Like within the last week, I believe.
Yeah. So thanks for mentioning Roger Moore in your conversation, Steve. Although Karen and I kind of chopped that down a little bit, but I don't think it was had so much to do with Roger Moore as it did with the persona and what we were more accustomed to seeing, as opposed to him being a good actor or not. Because I actually like The Saint, to be honest with you. So why don't I go ahead and mention this, one of the movies that I saw. And it was a very interesting film to me. It's based off of true events that occurred. I'm remiss about the year. This was the Napoleonic period, Napoleonic Wars. This is Napoleon Bonaparte was trying to pretty much take over the world prior to Adolf Hitler, we'll say. And he had the forces to do it. He just didn't manipulate the timing, which really was against him. And he, quote unquote, as the cliche term says, he met his Waterloo, being caught between the British on one side and the Russians on the other. So during this I'm killing it now. Napoleonic period, there were some officers who paths had crossed because one officer was tasked to bring this other officer in by his higher ups to arrest him for something he had done, and in the process he the arresting officer, lieutenant, goes to arrest him, and he does it in the home of a very prestigious woman of Paris. And the guy who was supposed to be arrested took it as an insult, and he challenged this lieutenant to a duel. So the name of the movie that I'm talking about is called The Duelist.
Well, the
And
Duelist.
it stars Harvey Keitel, and it also stars Keith Carradine. And this is a actual occurrence that happened during this time. And the feud, the duel between these guys, continued from that point. 10 years of dueling back and forth. Now, in many situations where we have a duel, the outcome usually is one person dies. Well, these guys were at that point where they were harming each other so badly, their seconds more or less kept them alive over time to fight again, to live to fight again. If one got hurt too harshly, they're pretty much pull them away. There was at one point in the film where they were both dueling each other with a different weapon, because there were different weaponry throughout the film. I believe they started with foils, I think, and then they went to sabers, and on and on, depending on when it was, what weapon they were going to use. And in the latter part of the film, they finalized it with pistols. So we're seeing this progression from one type of weapon that was used 10 years prior during warfare, and then another set of weapons, on and on and on. And so there was a point in the film where the two guys were fighting, and they've gotten to the point they're so exhausted and all cut up, both of them. And then they just kind of fling them. They can't even pick up the sabers, okay? So they fling themselves at each other. And they're trying to fight, and they're just like, the movement is not much faster than this, and it's
God.
And they're, and so their seconds just say, okay, this is ridiculous. They just go over.
Wow.
And they just pull them apart. neither one's strong enough to fight again until later on. And then at one point in the film, they have to put the duel on a back burner because of war. so, I mean, those are kind of the ironically funny parts of this very serious movie.
Right.
And I won't be a spoiler for the film, because I really want to be, but it's an interesting dichotomy where you have two men, because of pride and duty, they can't agree. And because of that situation, they duel on and on and on. And one guy doesn't want to duel as much, but his pride does keep him in the game. And the other guy wants to prove that he's the superior guy, and that keeps him in the game. And so there's this banter between the two of them, back and forth, and none of it truly makes any sense. The initial duel made minor sense, but it made no sense after that. And so Carradine and Keitel go back and forth throughout this film, and some of the dialogue in there is really interesting. This is actually a pretty good movie, despite the craziness. And what makes it even more enduring is the fact that this really happened in these guys' lives over time, and that's what makes gets you to understand that the things that happen in film sometimes are talking about things that actually happen in life. And even though it seems like it would be crazy, it seems like it would be a crazy film, that just goes to show you that life and art sometimes are very close, and that these crazy things that seem like it's just a movie and in film really happens in the world, and happen in their world during the Napoleonic War. And I was really impressed by it, and just watching the fight scenes. When you have swordsmen like Basil Rathbone and Errol Flynn, with this very poetic and flashy fight scenes. And then when you see something that's a little more rustic, and which makes more sense in the sense of how you think really these people were really kind of going at it for the most part, who don't have anywhere near the skills as especially of Basil Rathbone, who was pretty much the fencer for the Stars. It's bring a little more earthiness to it, a little more
Realism too.
And definitely realistic.
Yeah, it's not quite so. It's not so polished, because I mean, I think in real life fighting is exhausting. It's exhausting.
It is totally exhausting.
And it's very. I mean, it's hard. It's hard, and it's hard on you as a participant. It's hard to continue fighting, and you don't get that sense, especially in the fencing scenes, which take a lot of skill. I mean, no doubt. I mean, I used to fence, so I know firsthand how much skill it takes to make that stuff look as effortless as it does. But it's like the difference between, like this refined art that's not terribly real, like almost Gossamer-like, and then actual fighting. Like, if I remember, when I was in college, I was out for drinks with friends of mine or something, and these two guys got into like a fist fight, and thank God it was only a fist fight. But they were beating the crap out of each other. It was really late at night, and I just remember watching them, and it just like the blood, but just like the thud, like the hitting of fist against body part. And just the way that they reacted, it's hard. It's not like in movies or in television where somebody gets like this hit across the face, hit in the face, and then they get knocked down, then they bop right back up, and then they're ready to come back with a counterpunch. It's not like that at all. I mean, right. You get hit hard like that, you might lose teeth. God knows the crap is knocked out of you. You see in stars, and then you've got to remember where the hell you were and the hell that you're in, and then you've got to react to that. That takes some doing, and that's what there aren't, especially in those days, there weren't that many films that really showed how really unglamorous and just difficult fighting is, whether by sword, gun, or whatever. And The Duelist sounds like it actually went there. It
totally went there. And we're talking a lot of ugly fighting in this movie. And don't get me wrong, there's an essence and a sense of skill, but at the same time, as you allude to, Karen, a much more realistic realm of how duels were. And then like Errol Flynn, the fighting all over the place, that's wonderful, and it's very flashy and very glamorous to see. But you're talking about that pure effort here. You're talking about some cases like a saber's heavy, and the purpose for it is to one time hit you and it's done, kind of a weapon. And so here's these guys, they're going back and forth, back and forth. They're tired. They just can't do it anymore. That's what happens. They're dragging these sabers across the ground because it wasn't meant to truly be in a fencing, or not a fencing match, but to be in a dueling match like that is really very final. And it's really the infantry weapon. Not infantry, a cavalry weapon. That as you're riding, it's a slash here, slash there kind of thing. As a weapon in a duel, it's crazy. So yeah, I think this is a really worthwhile film to watch, and it is a little bit brutal, obviously, because it is about this ironic camaraderie that these two guys have over time, and respect and angst at the same time, kind of their oxymoronic lifestyle, as it were, throughout this film. So I think you should give it a shot. I think everybody should give The Duelist a shot.
Ooh, does that count some kind of pun?
No, because there were pistols in this movie.
Alrighty then. Lovely.
Now, I have one other movie that I was going to mention, and this movie, I like this movie because, you know, we always look at a lot of films, especially military films, where one side either wins or the other side wins. And, you know, there's these great plans to get done, and then it, you know, gets done, like the Guns of Navarone. You know, they get the job done even at the cost of many. And Dirty Dozen, they get the job done even at the cost of many. Well, in this film, they get the job not done. They didn't do the job well. In fact, the mission kind of was botched. And with all the great stars in this movie, you would think that the mission would be, even if it was just to save Hollywood, that the mission would go off as planned. Well, in A Bridge Too Far, not so much.
Oh, maybe it was a bridge too far.
Exactly. And the whole thing about this particular movie is the Allies are trying to find a way to corner the German army. And they're going to try to strategically gain access and or destroy bridges so that, you know, it breaks down the Germans' line of defense, or more or less. And just like a great plan, you know, sometimes the best laid plans of mice and men and military strategists don't go off so well. Now, the one cool thing about this particular movie is all the really good actors in it. Now, we have to take again into consideration it's 1977. And we're talking about actors who are still held in really, really good regard today. And yet, you know, if you're in the baby boomers, these actors were prior, just a little bit before that, in many cases. And so, you know, a lot of them have retired and all that, but a lot of them are still acting today. So I'm just wanted you to just hear the list of really great actors that are in this film. Sean Connery is in this. Ryan O'Neal, Michael Caine, Laurence Olivier, Gene Hackman, Dirk Bogart. Oh, I always say his name wrong. I think it is Bogart, and he's a British actor, very good actor. Omar Sharif. I mean, this is like a who's who of actors in this film. Oh, another good actor in this film is give me a moment. I'm sorry. Oh, this is bad. One of my favorite actors, Anthony Hopkins, is in this movie. Love Anthony Hopkins.
But how was
Michael
this,
Caine. I mean,
how
this
was
is
this movie
crazy.
received by the critics? How did this movie do at the box office, and how did it do critically?
Well, just to give you an idea, a brief, quick, because I don't have all that information. I apologize. But
the budget for the movie was $25 million. The box office was 50.7.
No.
so
That's
back in
pretty
the
good.
70s, that's pretty darn good. James Caan is in this movie. I mean, it's crazy. And it is a.
Did you say Robert Redford was in this movie?
I didn't get there yet, but yeah, Robert Redford. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. This is a movie.
Right. Who wasn't in the
has-
movie?
I'm trying to think in 1977 to have all those people in this one film. That's just crazy, but crazy good. And even IMDb, who's pretty harsh on when it comes to critiquing these films, it gave it a 7.4. That's
Wow.
kind of high. That's high for IMDb. So, you know, I agree. This is actually a pretty good movie. But it is a movie that, which I think needs to be said and needs to be told sometimes. Everything doesn't always work. Everything is not always at the end of the movie, we right off into the sunset. Sometimes you got to refocus. And this is that movie. You got to refocus because this did not work. So, yeah, A Bridge Too Far, I definitely think people should watch it. It's a good movie. And to see all these wonderful actors in and how they work together in this film is really good.
Wow. So do you want to go to Steve next while we still have him? No, you don't. Okay.
Steve says no.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll go to my next film. My next film is called The Turning Point. And this movie is one of my favorite movies of 1977 and just one of my favorite movies, period. It is what might derisively be called a chick flick. But well, because the main stars of the movie were women, and not only that, but the other just incredible crime was that this movie was about ballet, and it's like, oh my God, you know, what right-thinking man would be caught dead sitting in the seat of this theater watching that particular movie? But it's a very interesting movie. It's actually very, very well done. It starred Anne Bancroft and Shirley MacLaine. Tom Skerritt was in the supporting role, but also the great Mikhail Baryshnikov was in this movie. And Leslie Brown, who was actually a principal dancer at the American Ballet Theater, co-starred in this movie. And it's basically a movie about two women who were principal dancers and principal professional ballet dancers. And one of them stayed with the company, this fictional company based in New York, which I don't know, was probably American. I mean, it's like American Ballet Theater, except no, we weren't calling it that. But one of the women stayed with the theater. The other woman married one of the dancers and left the company to start a ballet school in Oklahoma. And their daughter has this incredible talent and decides that she wants to audition. So that brings one of the women back to New York to face the other woman. The other woman is her daughter's godmother, but they obviously haven't seen each other in quite a while. But they meet, and at first everything is wonderful, but then, you know, Kitty has claws, and the claws start coming out. All of these resentments, these undercover resentments about, you know, one woman is jealous. The Shirley MacLaine character is jealous of Anne Bancroft because Anne Bancroft still has a career in dance. And Bancroft is jealous of Shirley MacLaine because Shirley MacLaine got the one straight guy in the whole company, and, you know, got married and had kids and is having this idyllic life as far as Anne Bancroft is concerned. And, you know, Leslie Brown is the daughter, sort of caught in the middle. And she kind of gets hooked up with Mikhail Baryshnikov, but then it's not clear whether they're going to continue or not, and all of this other stuff. During all of this drama, there's just this incredible ode to dance, to the art that is ballet, and the incredible toughness and resilience and luck that it takes to actually have a career as a ballet dancer. And that's why I love the movie. I mean, it brought back wonderful memories for me because I grew up as a ballet dancer, and I used to perform as a ballet dancer on point, as a matter of fact. And I've auditioned for professional dance companies. So that brought back all of those memories of the practice and just the hours of work that it would take, hours, weeks, months of work that it would take to even prepare for an audition, let alone a performance. And just this focus on the ballet as, you know, like these people who seem so godlike on stage have these very human problems. So that was something else that was really brought out in this movie. The movie was very well regarded by the critics. In fact, was nominated for Best Picture. It was nominated for 11 Academy Awards, as a matter of fact, and did not win one.
Wow.
Not one. It shares that dubious distinction with The Color Purple.
Wow.
Two movies that have been nominated more times than the other movies and won nothing, had nothing to show for it.
Well, The Color Purple got Oprah.
Color Purple didn't win anything.
I thought Oprah got the.
No.
She didn't get a.
Hey, no.
And there wasn't any.
No.
And nobody said any.
No.
And Harpo didn't do.
No.
Any.
No, none of that happened. But Herbert Ross had a very good year in 1977. Or not in 1977, but the year of 1977 was a great year for Herbert Ross, for him, for being recognized as a director. Not only was he nominated for Best Director for The Turning Point, he was also nominated for Best Director for The Goodbye Girl, another movie that was released in 1977.
Richard Dreyfuss
and Martha Mason.
Martha Mason, yeah.
Yes, and another excellent movie. So both very fine movies. And the other thing, you were talking about sort of like the who's who that kind of paraded through A Bridge Too Far, Gregory. Well, there's kind of a who's who with regard to The Turning Point too, because what was I going to say? Let me see. Oh, Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly, Doris Day, and Joanne Woodward were all considered for lead roles in this movie. And in fact, Audrey Hepburn said that she regretted this was the one movie that got away from her, because it was just one of those. I mean, there's a continual, sort of a continuing thing that you hear these days, is that there aren't enough great roles written for women. Well, that was as true as it ever was in 1977 as it is in 2017, and probably even more true in 1977 than it has been in 2017, I mean. And so these were meaty, multifaceted roles for women, and the men took a back seat. That was rare. And so there was a lot of jonesing for these particular roles. Shirley MacLaine had a real advantage because she was a dancer, like one of the best dancers in the business.
Mm-hmm.
Anne Bancroft couldn't dance at all. And if you watch this movie, you will see that Anne Bancroft, she's told to strike poses, which she does, and that's all she does. She never really moves. Because she's not a dancer. Gelsey Kirkland, who was the principal dancer with the American Ballet Theater and who was dating Mikhail Baryshnikov at the time, was offered Leslie Brown's role, but she turned it down. Part of the reasoning is that she didn't want any part of Hollywood, but the other part was that she had a recurring injury that kept her from doing the dancing that was required, because there was no stunt dancing in the movie. They had actual ballet dancers doing these parts. And the movie was inspired by a real life story of friends of Herbert Ross.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So anyway, it was just, I just love the movie. There's a great scene where Shirley MacLaine and Anne Bancroft are having this fight. And at one point, and I think it was Shirley MacLaine throws a drink and hits Anne Bancroft in the face. Well, when they were rehearsing in the movie, Herbert Ross had them rehearse that fight scene. Right up to the part where the drink gets thrown, but he had them stop before that. So they kept rehearsing. It was finally time to do the take. So they do the take. They have the fight, and Shirley MacLaine. And I think it was Anne Bancroft who did the. Yes, Anne Bancroft throws the drink at Shirley MacLaine. So they do the take, and during the take, they go right through. I mean, they finish the scene, and Anne Bancroft throws the drink in Shirley MacLaine's face. Well, they had never rehearsed that. So when it actually happened, the look on Shirley MacLaine's face is like real shock, because she wasn't really expecting to be hit in the face with a drink, and that's a wrap. That's a print. That's a take. Let's move on to the next scene.
Very good.
like film gold. So
That's good stuff. Good stuff.
Well,
So-
you don't want a fake reaction, or you don't want something that doesn't look believable. So, bam.
exactly.
Exactly. So let me ask you this: in the midst of looking for the better films, and I know this is hard for you, Steve, did you find films that you didn't like when you were researching the 1977, or ones that you didn't even think you wanted
there's
to
a lot
see?
of films. There's a lot of films from 1977 that I haven't seen.
Mhm.
There's a lot of good ones. There's a lot of ones that I just kind of look at the title and I'm like, wow, that's something I'm probably never ever gonna check out. For example, let's see, Empire of the Ants.
Yep.
Not a thing I'm really interested in. Rabid is the name of the movie. Not something I'm gonna really think about. Kingdom of Spiders, definitely not something I'm
I knew that was coming.
Gonna take a walk through. Demon Seed. I've actually heard it's a terrible horror movie.
And you would be correct.
The Exorcist 2, I've never seen. And the reason for that is because once you watch The Exorcist, there's no reason to watch anything else.
Right.
So just a few movies like that. There is a movie that it really hits and misses for me. It's pretty much a 50% on everybody's rating, and I'd probably do just about the same. It stars Burt Lancaster, Michael York, and Barbara Carrera, who really is an actress who didn't have a very illustrious career, but just somehow managed to find her way in movies with actual real actors and actresses in them. It's kind of funny. But it's called The Island of Dr. Moreau.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
It's an interesting movie to say the least. I did actually enjoy the remake with Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer that came out plenty of years later. But it's a very, very 50% movie. It's like you can see where people tried, and then slowly as the movie goes on, you're like, wow, everybody just really saw that this was going nowhere.
Right. They tried, but then they quit.
And yes, they quit. It's actually based off a book written by H.G. Wells. Of course, we know of War of the Worlds, and other 1984, another amazing other stories. But it's one that if you're interested in checking out on a Friday or Saturday night, and you're just like, I was looking through this dollar movie bin, and I happened to see this. And it's got Burt Lancaster, and it's got Michael York. This might be right up your alley of going to sleep to.
All right.
But the overall plot is pretty good. Guy's ship sinks, winds up on a strange island, which is lo and behold, irony, the island of Dr. Moreau. And some of the creatures are part of sinister experiments, and then it's him trying to get off the island from there. And it's got a handful of twists and turns, nothing that you don't really see coming. You can tell when you look at other science fiction and fantasy movies during this period of time, this is way off. This is not good. They did not get the memo that they were doing things extraordinary over at Star Wars, over at Lucas. So, yeah, it's pretty bad.
Pretty bad.
Not one I'm truly going to be like, hey, go watch this.
Well, you can't and keep up your reputation.
I know, right? Which Karen completely denies exists.
I said allegedly. I didn't deny it. I just injected reasonable doubt.
Well, I've got two movies here.
You know what? You and your law terms.
I know.
I've got two movies here.
I have one movie. I have one more movie, Greg.
I'm going to let you finish, Karen.
Nobody cares, Karen.
Because I'm gonna be
Nobody
brief.
cares, Steve.
I'm gonna be brief.
Okay.
One of the movies is what got me hooked on something, and the other movie really didn't make me hooked on anything ever again. The movie that I least liked was Sinbad, The Eye of the Tiger, and as Karen would say, "Arr." And that was pretty much the best part of the film right there. And a movie that got me hooked on reading more about the movie, reading more about the subject, and then seeing the movie along with millions of people who've seen it on the big screen. The animated version of The Hobbit came out in 1977.
Oh wow, I watched that in a sophomore English class, and it was, very good, very well
It's a
done.
very good animated film, and it really explains and gives you a good understanding of what Bilbo's role was as a thief, and how horrific the mindset was of the dwarves. So, The Hobbit was a very good film, very good animated film, and it really got me hooked into Middle Earth. So, kudos to The Hobbit, 1977. Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, wow. That was fast. Well, my last film is one of, in my mind, it became and still remains one of the most iconic films ever in the history of American cinema.
What?
Yes, and it's not Star Wars, although Star Wars could certainly qualify like that, and certainly with for staying power it does. But my movie is not Star Wars; it's Saturday Night Fever.
What? John Travolta?
Yes, yes, yes. As a matter of fact, John Travolta, Karen Lee Gorney, Barry Miller, Joseph Cali are among the stars of this movie. Donna Pascoe, Sam Coppola, who played Sam Coppola in the movie, Robert Costanzo, Fran Drescher are some of the people in this movie. And Travolta scored a small role as Pizza Girl because she's related to John Travolta. But John Travolta plays Tony Manero, who works as like a stock boy in like a store. And I guess he graduated from high school, although it's not really clear. And his thing is that he does not have a future. He's like this cool dude. Like, I'm sure in high school, everybody thought he was cool, but high school's over. And who cares about you anymore after high school? Unless you can get a rep doing something else, or unless you've got a future doing something else. Well, he comes from like this poor working class Bronx type family, and it's not like college is in his future or anything. But he's got one thing that the rest of the Munchkins didn't have, and that's dancing talent. So he's at the club every Saturday night because he knows how to dance. And everybody else in his little group can't dance nearly as well as he can. And he takes dancing very seriously because for him, it's a ticket out of the rest of what he could laughingly call his life, which is just nothing but bleakness. His mother and father barely get along. He's overshadowed by his brother, the priest, because his brother became a priest. So the mother especially is always talking about his brother, and she always crosses herself when she talks about his brother, which drives Tony Manero crazy. He's like, why does she always do that, Dad? Why does she always cross herself when she talks about him?
Don't touch my hair.
Right, and he hated having his hair touched. So So he wants to like compete in dancing or whatever. There are all these contests at the disco, and he always wins, and everybody wants him to dance, and he's great at it. So that's the story. But then there's all this other drama going on. There's him and his friends, which I guess we would call a gang today, but they weren't a gang. They just kind of hung out, but they would like, do some wild and crazy things. They would hot rod, or they would hang out, they would drink, they would smoke pot, they would, get drunk and try stupid stunts. But then there was all this angst, the problems that each of them had in their lives would sort of at different times kind of overshadow all of their supposed fun and drive them to do things that were crazy, dangerous, or just sad. So there was that. So it's a real mix. On top of that, there was just this amazing, and I do mean amazing, musical score and soundtrack by the Bee Gees. The Bee Gees did most of the main songs that made it into the movie, and then the other music that accompanied the movie was also equally as good. And that music is just as good today, in my view, as it was 40 years ago. And I say this because I remember watching Saturday Night Fever not too long ago, maybe last year. Watched the movie from beginning to end, and I was amazed again at how incredible the dancing was, because John Travolta did all of his own dancing, and nobody knew the man could dance. I mean, he was still trying to outlive, being on
Welcome Back, Kotter.
On Welcome Back, Kotter as whatever character he played, which was like Idiot Boy. Basically, he played Idiot Boy on Welcome Back, Kotter, and I can't remember the name of that character he played. But he just was kind of trying to outgrow that. But nobody knew he could dance, and it took especially for disco dancing, a lot of athleticism. I mean, there are things that he does, like when he does these sort of knee jumps where he folds his knees in, then jumps back up. They kind of look almost like inverted Russian jumps. That takes incredible agility and strength, and then some of the lifts that he does, and just amazing. But I remember watching this movie just last year, and then like singing all the songs, like the songs just continually ran through my mind after the movie was over because they were so good. And they just so captured the essence of that movie and the essence of the 70s and the essence of the disco era. It sort of captured like the angst and the glory of the disco era all at once. It was really, like I said, it was iconic.
Welcome Back, Kotter. Vinnie Barbarino, right?
Yes, Vinnie Barbarino. Yes. Well, he was still trying to escape the shadow of Vinnie Barbarino when he played Tony Manero in Saturday Night Fever. And that just totally blew any semblance of Vinnie Barbarino away. And then it's like, oh my God, he's an amazing actor and he's an amazing dancer.
Yeah. John Travolta had his run. I think I really liked him in Phenomenon.
Uh-huh.
I thought he was really good in that. But yeah, he was especially good in Saturday Night Fever and Staying Alive, the sequel.
Yes.
Just a very talented guy, and that he definitely had that moment in hand for sure. Yeah, that was a good movie. I liked it too, and loved the music.
Hard to believe that was 40 years ago. 40.
It is. But a good movie. So a movie that stands the test of time. Yeah.
Nominated again for I want to say how many. It was Oscar nominated for John Travolta received a Best Actor nomination, Best Actor in a Leading Role. And then it also was Golden Globe nominated for Best Motion Picture, Best Actor in a Motion Picture, and Best Original Score. Amazingly enough, it did not receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Motion Picture Score. It should have, though.
Yeah, it was good stuff. Very good stuff. Well, that was cool, Karen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting kind of at that point where we're going to get out of here, but I hope the different films that we mentioned tonight were some things that might be interesting to you. And we really think you should, of course, always think you should take a look at them and give us your opinion. Leave us a comment here on our YouTube channel and or and our Facebook fan page, which is under Real Point of View, or under my fan page under The Real Movie Guy. Hopefully you'll, again, watch these films. So anything else to say to our viewers out there before we take off? Other than that.
I'm at peace.
Kids, remember, work on your meditation.
I'm at.
And stay in school.
And stay in school.
And don't
do drugs.
And don't do drugs.
And don't try this at home.
Don't try this at home. I look pretty ridiculous because I have no idea what I'm doing.
And don't go to Mars.
Huh?
Yeah, good Lord, don't go to Mars.
You know, the Mars movies that have been out here lately, other than the most recent one with, what's his name?
Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
The Martian.
Yeah, other than that, no, because like even he was almost left there, so no.
Do you understand how much money the United States government has wasted saving Matt Damon?
I say a lot. And did you know the Chinese government also trying to save Matt Damon in his most recent film? He thinks he's a warrior that's working. They're paying a lot of money for him to jump off that wall. The wall. Not Pink Floyd's wall. Matt Damon's wall.
As far as I'm concerned, they can save their money. Everybody can save their money. He doesn't have to be saved.
Wow, Karen.
Well, he was
Somebody's
evil.
not a Matt Damon fan.
Well, he was
I'm not a
evil.
Matt Damon fan.
He was evil in the Mr. Ripley.
Yes, the talented Mr. Ripley.
What was the talent? Evil.
Yes, he was quite evil.
Evil.
So, kids, don't be Matt Damon.
Don't be Matt Damon. Kevin Bacon, maybe. Matt Damon, no. 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon is really 3.5.
Okay, and on that really bizarro note, we're jetting out of here, aren't we, Greg?
I'm leaving on a jet plane. Don't know where I'll be back.
We're going to be back again next Friday, okay?
Oh, then take that back. Okay. Thanks for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful night and be safe out there and engulf the world of its many wonderful things, but especially the movies. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.